I'll just copy it and paste it here. Now, as everyone knows, for an API to work, we need to generate an access token, which provides authenticity and authentication that we are the eligible users. And there is post call and get call. In post call, we send a request to the server, and in get call, we send request to get something from the server. So here is the sample get call to the inventory, bills, and payments endpoint of an API. So as we can see, this is the base URL. The API name is service titan, and this is the relative URL. And here is the um, endpoint which we are making a call to. So as we can see, there is ID and many other details. And here is the API, payments API. So we can see the get call, how to make it. Here we need to specify the tenant ID. So in my Postman, the tenant ID is passed as a variable. So this variable can be seen here. So we have passed all the variables like tenant ID, client secret, API key, access token. So here when we go, we can see in body and in headers how everything has been passed on. In token, access token has been passed. So now what we will do is, now if we want to store this into database, so we have the Azure Data Factory in which everything has been set up, and it needs to be from data flow which is available in ADF. It needs to be stored in the database. So what we need is to create a table to store this data. So we will just copy this entire JSON schema and present it to ChatGPT, and we'll just ask provide me a SQL create table query to create a payments table. So when we will submit it, we will be presented with the create table statement by ChatGPT. So as you can see, it has created the entire table. So now if we copy and if we paste it over here, we can see it has presented us with the entire code. So we can use it to create tables. Now, once we are done with it, now if suppose we want to create a Azure function in Python. So we can provide it a prompt like write a Python query, write a Python code to build a Azure function to make a post call to get access token, and then make a get call to get data from API payments. So now if we will provide it the access token URL, and if we'll provide the API endpoint, and submit it, so it will provide us the entire code and entire process how to do every step, step by step. We just need to replace the placeholder to provide the API scope, the tenant ID, the client ID, and client secret. So we need to install VS Code to create Azure functions. And in VS Code, we need to install few extensions, which are Azure Tools, Azure Databases, Azure Accounts, Azure Resources, Azure Functions. So only then it will work, otherwise it won't work. So this will be our code. So as we can see, it has created various functions to get the access token. Here we need to replace it with the proper credentials, and in get payments data we have to um here we have to provide the API scope. Rest everything looks fine, so we can just run this code, and if the status is 200, it means the code executed fine. Otherwise, there is some error. So if we see the API documentation, so okay. So one more thing, if we are writing some stored procedures, or first I'll show you something else. So if we have this Python code, and for some client or some client we need to write a code in C sharp. So if we are working with SSIS, that is SQL Server Integration Services, so there is a mandatory clause that we have to write everything in C sharp. So if we need to write functions for that, so we can use ChatGPT effectively. So we can see. So if there is some other request, such as if we need to convert it into Java, then also we can use it. So we can see how it will work. So thing is, we don't have to blindly trust whatever the ChatGPT provides. Also, we have to use our mind as well to check whether the output provided by ChatGPT is correct or not. Otherwise, we'll be misguided and our logic might fail. So now we can see that it has provided us with the suitable code to do the necessary task. So in ChatGPT, in C Sharp, the syntaxes is different. So hence we can see the long code. Now, if we have some stored procedure, and some stored procedure we are unable to like know what the stored procedure does, or we have some DAX in Power BI, so we can copy the entire uh, operation. So we will take for invoices, and we will paste it. So we can ask it to explain the SP step by step. So it will let us know what every line of the stored procedure does and what is the purpose. So we can see the usability of the SP and what every line set of line does. So now if we want to add some new parameters, such as we need to modify the SP to add a code in the above SP to capture number of inserts, updates, and error into a parameter table, error table. So we can see it will modify few set of lines in the above SP to capture the inserts, updates, and errors. So we can see it has implemented a merge counts operation and a error table operation with a timestamp to capture the error message. And if we have some SP which has some errors, suppose if we have not in added like let's suppose we have written a code which does not have values. So now if we are debugging it, if it takes more than an hour, so we can use the help of ChatGPT to find our error. Now if we are preparing for some certification such as I am preparing for database, so if I need help with it, suppose I want to give a mock test, so provide me with sample mock questions to give exam of Databricks certified. So it will provide us some actual questions. So we can even answer them and it will let us know whether our answers are correct or wrong. Now we had created one table from the JSON schema. So suppose if we want to test and debug it. So we want some data to practice our testing. So what we will do is we will just copy this table and we will write a query for this SQL table provide provide me some sam. So what we can see, it has generated few mock datas for our payments table. So you can insert these values. So if we need more, We can just ask, provide me with some more values. So it can write as long as we need. Suppose we have an open API for testing, public APIs. So we can even test this API enforcement. So if we paste it and make a get call, we can get around 1427 entries. So if we provide this API and write a Python code to get data from this API. So if we test it, it will provide us the entire API. So now if we'll test it in VS Code and we'll provide the API URL. So now if we'll run it, we can see invalid Python interpreter. So we'll select the interpreter. We need to save it. So we can see it has called the data. So if we'll copy this response, and we can put it into any JSON schema validator. So it should be a valid JSON. You can remove some portions. So this was the response from the API. So as you can see, the code is precise and exact. So we can also modify this code effectively for our needs, such as if you want to store it into database. So it can provide us with, it was the additional code to insert into the database. If we want to store into, here is the database credentials that we need to enter. If we need to insert into Azure Blob Storage, so we can provide it. So as you can see now, it will provide us the additional code to create blob create block blobs into the Azure Blob Storage. So here it has created blob service client and container client. Here we have to provide the connection string for our Azure blob. So you have to provide the container name, connection string, API endpoint, and blob name. So it will create the necessary blob. So that's it. If anyone has any questions, they can ask me right away. Okay, so anyone can reach me after the session as well. Whenever you guys are working on this task or come across any doubts over this topic. So thank you everyone. So we can leave the meeting.